Hello, everybody, and welcome to Atheist Sunday School, your one-stop shop for everything Atheist Sunday and school. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today we are covering Ezekiel chapters 1 through 4.
Finally done with all that Jeremiah stuff.
Yeah, and now we're into something a lot more exciting.
Really? A lot more?
Here's something you'll really love.
Wow.
And here's why. Because all of the prophets that we discussed before, and even some of the ones that we will discuss later, are basically toned down in comparison to Ezekiel.
Ezekiel. Wow.
Yeah. There's this whole list of the same motifs, the same subjects, sometimes the same imagery, even, that's covered by Ezekiel and the other prophets. And there's, in Erdman's here listed out, there's a whole lot of them. But they're all basically ramped up a lot. So, as you can see by the background, if you have seen these things before, you'll know that we're going to get into some crazy stuff here. So it's going to be pretty exciting. And that's going to be in chapter 1.
Incredible. And
yeah.
Ezekiel is, if I'm correct, really the last relatively long book in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, it doesn't get longer than... I'm flipping through here, and I think Zechariah
is like
Zechariah has
14
chunk. Chapters. Ezekiel has 48.
Yeah, so this is the last really long one, and then we're gonna be into the shorter ones, which is exciting.
Yeah,
I suppose
once we get into the short ones, it's like a straight shot. I mean, we're almost done with the Old Testament. Look at this. Look at this. There's a little more. Yeah.
No, that doesn't even count, yeah.
Like one page more. Okay, so there's this that we still have left, and there's
all that we read.
That we read. All right, so...
We're making our way through it.
We are almost at the end. We just have to finish these last few prophets.
Yeah, and then we're off to the New Testament.
Yeah.
And then once we're in the New Testament,
we get to read the same story over and over and over and over again.
Yep. We're going to read the same one. Well, we're going to read almost the same one 3 times in a row. And then the same one, but not really the same one. Just different stuff we didn't hear before, but about the same events for another time. And then in Acts, we're going to hear about like the secondary characters.
Of course, everyone's most excited about Revelation.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited about Revelation.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun. So
stick
around,
we usually we won't even have to order commentaries for Revelation, I think, because I have a lot of commentaries on Revelation. So I think we should be all set for that one.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about Ezekiel a little bit.
Let's introduce our books first. I have the King James Version of the Bible.
I have the English Standard Version of the Bible.
We also have the Robert Alter version of the Hebrew Bible with commentary.
And we have the Hermenia translation and commentary by Walther Zimmerli.
As well as Erdman's commentary on the Bible and the Holy Scriptures according to some Jews and the New King James.
Yeah, we got quite a lot of stuff here.
And the Old Testament survey.
Yes, here it is. There is a lot of stuff that we can talk about when it comes to Ezekiel, because Ezekiel, as I mentioned before, is this, it's a prophet that is very, very amped up. So
extreme.
Yeah, but the interesting part about the book of Ezekiel is that this is pretty much the only prophet that we can date very, very reliably.
Oh, when's it from?
It's from either the early or the late exilic period.
Oh.
It's just exilic, straight up exilic. There is really no doubt about that.
Then very fitting that it comes after Jeremiah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about...
We've been waiting a while to get some exilic stuff. I mean, we kind of had that in Esther, but like otherwise, there really isn't much. at least in what we've covered so far. Like,
Yeah.
There's
unless
a lot
you
of apocrypha that we covered that has exilic stuff in it.
Oh, well, apocryphal stuff would be was mostly post exilic,
right.
like way further post exilic.
Right, exactly what I'm saying. So
yeah,
we haven't had
and
anything that's actually just straight up exilic.
well, obviously the Book of Esther is post exilic.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, accurate.
Yeah, it's actually quite late.
Yeah, but it's very. I like it. I like it. It's a very good read. I thought.
Yeah, it's a nice play.
All right. So let's talk about a little bit more about the date. There are a lot of dates within Jeremiah. A lot of pretty specific ones.
Jeremiah?
Actually. Sorry, not Jeremiah. Sorry, I'm in the Jeremiah mindset.
We've
Ezekiel.
been reading Jeremiah's stuff for way too long now.
Yeah.
Ezekiel is not
Ezekiel.
a bullfrog.
So in Ezekiel, there are a lot of very specific dates. So here are just a few of them. I'm going to start listing them off. So in chapter 1, verse 1, 5th day of the 4th month in the 30th year, which is clarified by the further definition, the 5th day of the month in the 5th year after the deportation of King Jehoiakim. Yes. And then let's see some more dates. The 5th day of the month of the 6th, the 5th day of the 6th month of the 6th year in chapter 8, 10th day of the 5th month of the 7th year in chapter 20. Very specific dates.
Yeah, it's a lot like Jubilees.
Yeah. And because of this, it's fairly easy to date. I'd say. One of the interesting things is that one of the dates is taken, or we can actually match it up, I should say, with 2 Kings 25. So the date of 24:1 again shows itself on closer observation to have been taken over from 2 Kings 25:1, and the date in 24:1 is evidently not listed on this. Okay, for some reason.
So when it says the 30th year in verse 1 here, it's obviously not the 30th year from creation.
No, it's the 30th year of the reigning king.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's for authorship, this text, unlike many of the other texts we've read, you can reasonably call this a unity. But of course, just like every other text in textual history, there are, glosses, there are small additions here and there, but overall, this is of the same author, I suppose. Like, there's not like, how we had like a second Isaiah and a third Isaiah? It's not the case here. Although the prophet, the guy who was writing it, we can just call him Ezekiel. Doesn't really matter.
Pseudo Ezekiel.
What, like, even if it doesn't really matter, let's just assume that was his name. So
Pseudo-nihilism, it's okay. It doesn't really matter.
of course. Now I don't even know what I was talking about.
Oh, great.
You were talking about the authorship.
Right, the authorship. Okay.
So it's one guy probably.
Yeah.
With some redactors later on.
Yeah. But he did have some influence from other books. Not that he took stuff from it, but he showed familiarity with some traditions. Now, a lot of the prophets that we've covered did emphasize one thing over another when it came to some traditional stuff, like either the Exodus or the patriarchs, something like that. And let me just pull up to the page here.
And let me just note that looking at the page count in the KJV that I have here, Ezekiel takes up more than half of the rest of the Old Testament that we're reading.
Fair enough. All right, great.
Yeah. So
we don't
last
have that
big
much
book.
longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so apparently there has been for a long time a pretty ongoing debate about how much is taken over from other books. And like some of the scholars that are cited here that were having this kind of discussion are from, I guess, the more classical age of biblical scholarship,
Mm.
like early 1900s, late 1800s kind of thing.
There was a lot of stuff going on at that time,
Yeah.
especially in like Middle East studies. I mean, they, if I remember correctly, they started publishing English translations of the Enema Elish around that period. So
Yeah, a lot of stuff was going on in religious studies.
yeah,
And then, I think the latest of these scholars would have been more prominent in like the 40s, which is why it's so it's been going around for quite a while. And remember, this book, this translation is from 1979.
yeah,
The original was from 1969. So it is quite old. That's why we have a whole bunch of stuff that we are going to be concentrating on as well. But there's still valuable commentary in here.
and the commentary in Eerdmans for Ezekiel is by John A. Goldengay.
Yes. Goldengay was actually, if you remember when we were covering Psalms, the author we were reading from, Ben Witherington, he cited Goldengay a lot.
Oh, cool!
Yeah. I remember that name because, well,
It stands out.
yes, it stands out. Let's just say it stands out. So in his dissertation, E. Rolland examined the prophetic writings from the point of view of the presence of three great circles of tradition: Exodus from Egypt, election of Zion, and election of David and his dynasty. G. Von Rand also follows this line of examination. From these studies, it has been shown that the North Israelite Hosea is quite one-sidedly familiar with the first-named circle of tradition, whilst the Jerusalemite Isaiah, just as one-sidedly, is determined by the second and third circles, which were particularly important in Jerusalem. What are we to make in regard of this position of Ezekiel? Ezekiel shows himself clearly to be a prophet of the later period, since the one-sided adherence to one of the three traditions streams is no longer found with him. The traditions have begun to be mixed, which would fit in with the model.
Yes.
Uh,
Let me note from Goldengay's commentary here that about the canonical status of the book, that nothing is known of how the book came into being or came to be accepted as canonical in the Second Temple community. There are varying views on how far the material in the book comes from Ezekiel himself. The book has been seen as coming entirely from him, or as having very little to do with the real prophet in Babylon, or as containing much material from him which has been supplemented to suggest its implications for people living later. Unevenness in the book may make the first view seem unlikely, and the second view may seem a priori implausible. In the case of the third view, it's difficult to know where specifically Ezekiel's work ends and the work of disciples begins.
Yeah, and I would say that even if it wouldn't come, I don't know if it would have come directly from Ezekiel himself, but I would say that when we are referring to Ezekiel in the sense of an author, then it would just be whoever wrote it. It would just be the title or the name that we are giving the author.
Yeah, we're not going to be referencing P or Y in the Torah.
Oh, why? Yeah. Yeah. So it's although it would effectively be more like that, just with a name.
Yeah. So Ezekiel.
Yeah, we're just gonna stick with Ezekiel
Or Zeke.
I mean, I like Zeke.
Yeah, Zeke the Geek.
All right. So more on some of these traditions. Something I found kind of interesting. Was that in 1414 a mention of exemplary pious men? There's a mention of exemplary pious men of the past: Noah, Daniel, and Job, which I thought was interesting. 3227 knows of the heroes of the mythical past. Behind 47:1 we can see the tradition of the river of paradise, and chapter 31 paints the picture of the world tree in brilliant colors. In all this, Ezekiel makes use of mythical material much more strongly than we see in the earlier writings, in the earlier writing prophets, and uses it for his particular message. So yeah, these traditions are all kind of coming to a head here, and he's really taking up the imagery to an extent that others did not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely much more of an interesting read, I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot more like ridiculous heavenly stuff in Ezekiel than in Jeremiah.
Yeah, and chapter 1 is nuts. So one of the things that I found interesting was the link to Jeremiah, actually. So particularly with Jeremiah 15, because the Jeremiah 15 and I think Ezekiel 13 and 14 are very, very close together.
Mm-hmm.
Or chapters, it's kind of sporadic actually. So the theme of the false prophets, which is dealt with in Ezekiel 13, is also found in Jeremiah 23, which with statements in which I can't even read right now. What is wrong with me? With statements which are in part not very far removed from Ezekiel's. In Ezekiel 13, the setting in parallel of the prophets and the prophetesses is distinctive of Ezekiel. In the explanation of the inevitability of judgment, which cannot be averted even by the presence of 3 exemplary pious men, we can again probably see a freely remodeled sketch of Jeremiah 15:1. In place of the great Israelite intercessors Moses and Samuel, we find in Ezekiel 14:14 the 3 righteous men, Noah, Daniel, and Job. When immediately afterwards in Jeremiah 15:2, a causistic development of the 4 different possibilities of judgment follows. Although there are again differences of detail, we must reckon here also in Ezekiel on a very precise knowledge of Jeremiah's oracle. So showing knowledge of Jeremiah.
Cool. And it references Daniel. Now, Daniel is a couple books later. We'll be covering Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel's going to be fun. It is an apocalyptic text. It's the first one, like straight up apocalyptic text that we're going to be getting into.
Actually, Daniel takes place right after Ezekiel. So, although there are references in Ezekiel to Daniel, for some reason...
Well, yeah, written differently, because you have to remember that Daniel, although the book of Daniel itself was written in like the 2nd century BCE, it is talking about a character that lived like in the I want to say in the 7th century or in the 8th, maybe. I don't remember quite exactly, but someone
BC.
Yeah, of the far past.
Yes.
So there's a whole lot here. Let's talk about his I think we will have our own commentary on this specifically because that's just kind of what we do when we read through these books. But there's a huge history that's outlined, but it's basically the history of from the period between the Assyrian invasion and the Babylonian exile, and it's fairly detailed. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm not even going to read most of it, but I am just telling you that it's here in the Old Testament survey, and it is quite detailed. And if there is information that we are missing, we can go back and reference this. So it exists there if we are going to need it, but most of the stuff we've already read about, we've covered on the show, however many times.
Right, and as you can see with our background image, there's quite a bit of angelology that will be occurring here.
Yeah. Now,
which, if you remember books like Enoch or Jubilees,
Enoch,
yeah, there was a bit there. So maybe we can reference some of the similarities and differences between those books as well.
Yes, absolutely. And what you just reminded me of is that I'm currently in an Intro to Judaism class.
Yeah, which you need an Intro to Judaism.
Yeah. And you know what? First of all, it makes me mad the class itself, because it's very much
Talmudic.
Yes and no. It's very much, let's just take some of this stuff at face value, and I'm like, that disgusts me. But it's they're mostly talking about the actual traditions now, which is fine. It's fine to learn about the traditions and the practices as they are now.
The cheeseburgers and new kosher rules.
The challah bread and stuff like that.
How they have elevators in Israel that just stop at every floor on the Sabbath, so that you don't have to spark a fire.
Right, which is whatever. That stuff is fine, right?
Yeah.
So one of the assignments that we had to do recently was referencing talking about the Exodus and the manna from heaven story. Now, just as like a side note, I threw in there that sometimes rabbis called that manna from heaven the food of angels, because that we just covered that on the show.
We did.
Yeah. That was noted in the commentary in the Wisdom of Solomon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she, in her reply, she said, she was like, okay, these responses are fine. Not sure what the Wisdom of Solomon is, though.
It's a book written in Greek.
I'm saying that she had no knowledge of the Wisdom of Solomon.
She didn't know that it existed?
Yeah, she had no idea what the thing even was.
Okay, well, sad to say, a lot of Jewish people have no knowledge of things that are outside of the Jewish canon.
Sure, but you'd think a professor of Judaism would know that.
You would
especially since we covered since we covered in the class like mystic stuff.
Yeah, just don't bring up any targums. I'm sure she's unaware.
Oh yeah, like what language are those written in? I've never even seen them. Yeah. So
I'm sure she's very well studied in what she specializes
I'm sure.
in.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about some of the theology that we're going to be getting into, huh?
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Now, we are going to have our own thoughts on that. We're going to have our own things that we notice. But just to, kind of a purview here. This section in the Old Testament survey is labeled Ezekiel's critique of the orthodox yahwism of his day.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're going to be getting something quite different, theologically speaking.
Right, because there are different trends that occur in different books of the Bible, and some of them are very Yahweh alone, like Jeremiah's stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much so. And others, like in certain Psalms.
Yeah, it's very, it's hinted, it's kind of the remnants of before Yahweh alone. So although we cannot assume that all the exiles deported in 597 BCE subscribe to the same Yahwistic theology, it is helpful to understand prominent aspects of that theology, since doing so helps us to understand why Ezekiel's oracles were resisted by his audience prior to the fall of Jerusalem.
And that's another theme that carries over from Jeremiah.
In his commentary, Block, some other scholar, identifies 4 pillars of divine promise upon which the people of Judah rested their faith. First, they believed that they were Yahweh's chosen people, enjoying the blessings of their covenant relationship with Yahweh forged at Sinai centuries earlier. From this belief, they derived a sense of confidence based on the power of their God to ensure their welfare, to protect them. To be sure, the Judeans knew that maintaining their covenant relationship with Yahweh brought obligations as well as benefits. Nevertheless, one can imagine that the latter were emphasized to the neglect of the former. Second, they believed that Yahweh had granted land to Israel's ancestors and that they were inheritors of that land. Yahweh owned the land they inhabited, and their presence there was God's will. The third and fourth pillars of Israel's theology are particularly crucial for understanding the orthodox Yahwistic faith of Ezekiel's day. In both, the city of Jerusalem plays a crucial role. On the one hand, the people of Judah believed that Yahweh had entered into an eternal covenant with the descendants of David, promising that the Davidic dynasty would reign in Jerusalem in perpetuity. And of course, we know how that went. The people living in Jerusalem during the years leading up to the Babylonian onslaught knew well their traditions about David and about God's unconditional promise that one of his descendants would occupy Israel's throne forever, presented as Yahweh's declaration to David through. Okay, so he's just quoting the. He's just quoting the Davidic promise, the dynastic promise. Other biblical literature declares in exuberant poetry the belief that Yahweh promised to ensure the continuity of the Davidic dynasty forever. Psalm 2, a royal psalm, of course, yeah, we remember Psalm 2. That was a pretty important one, straight up.
Yes.
And then they're quoting that from Psalm 2. These two texts and many others affirm Yahweh's commitment to the Davidic kings who occupied Judah's throne throughout the pre-exilic period. So it has that strong connection to the dynastic promise. On the other hand, Jerusalem was crucial to the theology of pre-exilic Judeans because the Solomonic temple stood within its walls. The temple built during Solomon's reign was likely very important from the time of its completion. I'm sure it was. Probably incredibly important. So, and then it talks about how important the actual temple was.
Right.
So like the prophet Jeremiah, Ezekiel's contemporary, who remained in Jerusalem, Ezekiel scrutinized these four tenets of the Yahwistic theology of his day and subjected them to a radical critique. True, Yahweh and Israel were covenant partners, but the people had for centuries failed to fulfill their covenant obligations. While the covenant forged at Sinai demanded Israel's undivided fidelity to God, the people of Ezekiel's day were idolatrous. Indeed, their idols had even found their way into Yahweh's own temple. Ooh, we can, once we get to chapter 8, that's where that's from, apparently. While the covenant demanded that the people observe moral and ethical laws, these laws were abrogated by each generation. And of course, that was the whole big hubbubaloo, right? Is that something that Jews say?
Hullabaloo.
Hullabaloo?
Not hubbubaloo.
Hubbubaloo?
Hullabaloo.
Hullabaloo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oy vey.
God had indeed granted to Israel the land promised to the ancestors, but its failure to obey the covenant regulations meant that Israel could and would lose its right to inhabit that territory. Yahweh had determined long ago that David's descendants would rule over God's people, but Judah's kings, and especially its last monarchs, blatantly broke God's law and ravaged their subjects like lions, oppressing the very people whose rights they were duty-bound to protect. Ezekiel believed that God's glory had resided in the temple in Jerusalem, but he insisted that Yahweh was abandoning that temple because the abominations committed within it had polluted the place completely. Without God's protective presence, the temple was doomed to destruction.
And that's different than Jeremiah.
Absolutely.
Right. Jeremiah's whole idea was like, it was also because of profane practices, but mostly to do with Gehenna, I think. And it wasn't that Yahweh was just not protecting them, is that he purposefully had others come in and destroy everything.
Yeah. So already different theology coming out. So Ezekiel offered his fellow exiles no hope that their homeland might survive Babylonian aggression. To the contrary, he insisted that Yahweh was bringing about its downfall. But it is, I guess, slightly different because the temple was... Yahweh didn't leave the temple, but there is going to be a part in here during a vision where Yahweh is leaving. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure I read that somewhere in all these books.
All right. There's some about the theology here in Eerdmans, too, in Golden Gaze commentary. He says, other prophets affirm the sovereign lordship of Yahweh, Ezekiel uniquely uses the phrase sovereign Yahweh as his characteristic title for God. Translations such as Lord God obscure the fact that it combines the word for sovereign with God's actual name, combining a sense of privilege and nearness in knowledge of God's name with a sense of awesomeness, because the name itself suggests something of the unpredictable enigma of the active presence of Yahweh. Ezekiel is the boldest of the prophets in attributing all that happens to Yahweh's sovereignty. This includes the apostasy of the righteous, the delusion of the prophet, and the guidance offered by Babylonian divination. His apparently being often addressed by heavenly aid rather than directly by God perhaps links with his sense of Yahweh's transcendent awesomeness and his own earthly vulnerability. Yahweh's correlative characteristic title for Ezekiel is mortal man, literally son of man, a less odd term in Hebrew than in English. While other prophets are directly addressed by Yahweh, no one else is directly addressed so frequently. Yet, whereas...
So he's basically just calling him a human. That's his name for him, human?
Yeah.
Hello, human.
Mortal.
How's it going?
Yet, whereas some other prophets are addressed by name, Ezekiel is always addressed by this idiomatic expression, meaning human being. Set over against Lord Yahweh, it suggests humanity in its creatureliness and frailty. Now he adds on here a major point at which Ezekiel is unlike most of the other prophets. He's a priest. This makes a most significant contribution to the nature of his prophetic ministry.
Yeah, definitely. And his viewpoint of all this would be different than just like some random Judean.
Right, definitely, because presumably he's gone through a lot more specific training.
Yeah, and he has like a lot more, or I guess very different biases as to how things ought to be.
Yeah. So why don't we hop into it then? Unless
yeah.
you have
Alright.
more to say.
I mean, aside from
After
just,
30 minutes of commentary, you sure you want to get into it?
Yeah.
just after introducing the chapter, I suppose,
Right.
or I guess the
Chapter
section.
1.
Yeah, chapter 1. The section, the unit that they have this as is 1 through 3:15. That would be the Ezekiel's first vision, his calling, I
All right.
suppose.
And we're also covering chapter 4 today.
Yeah. So the unit must undoubtedly be understood in its present form as a complete unit. Ezekiel, who was among the exiles of his people in Babylon, was surprised by a powerful vision of God. Through the divine word which this brought, and in accompanying symbolic experience, he was called to be a prophet for the house of Israel. And then it starts, kind of just going through some of the stuff, but it should be seen as a unit. The section contained within the introductory and concluding framework was regarded by earlier commentators as quite free from difficulty, although the introductory verses 1 through 3, with their striking change from the first to the third person, provoked critical analysis and led Kretschmer to his thesis of the two recensions of the book of Ezekiel. No one was at first struck by the parallelism between the great vision of chapter 1 and the divine speech of chapter 2. It was first certain small textual observations which led to the questioning of this view. J. Herman, however, had established that verses 14 through 28 belong in the section in which they stand. This led to a difficulty for him in his commentary when he amended some Hebrew in 1:5 following the Greek epi autois. So hold on, I can actually translate this on the spot. So it would be upon or on top of. Yeah, on top of them. That's a plural.
Okay.
So that's the Greek one. If the meaning here is a being in human form was over them, right there, then this appears directly to presuppose the description of the human forms above the living creatures in 127. So then it goes on just a little bit more about the textual variations here. But honestly, we should be good to go.
All right, then let's hop into it. The book of Ezekiel, chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God.
Actually, I should say one thing here. So in the 30th year there, what this refers to as, this is according to Alter, what this refers to has stumped scholars. One proposal is that it is the 30th year of Ezekiel's life. I was guessing it'd be the king.
Yeah.
Because that's usually how dating worked.
Golden Gate attests to it being the 30th year of Ezekiel's life.
Oh, okay.
But there aren't that many kings who reign for 30 years.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Anyways, in the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. Interesting here how in verse 1, it's first person.
Yeah.
And then in verse 3, it refers to Ezekiel the priest. So either this is someone writing about Ezekiel, or it is Ezekiel referring to himself, because in verse 4, it again switches to first person. And I looked, and behold,
Behold!
a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud and a fire infolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides, and they 4 had their faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went every one straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man, the face of a lion on the right side. They 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. So this is cherubim, right?
That is what it is sounding like. What verse did you just end on?
I just finished verse 10.
Okay. I'm just looking for specific names here. So of course likeness pops up a lot here. This word demut and its complementary term mare, look or appearance, are insisted on again and again in this vision, as well as in several visions that follow. The prophet wants to make clear that his report of what he has seen of something that can be represented only by analogy. So these are likeness, appearances, analogs of things known to humankind, but not literally those things. And yeah, more on their faces and their wings. As the vision proceeds, it becomes progressively difficult to sort out visually what these creatures and the moving composite they make up look like. 2.5 millennia of exegetes have labored in vain to work out all the details. A certain bewilderment may well have been Ezekiel's intention. There are abundant repetitions of phrases through the passage, some of them probably quite deliberate in order to create an incantatory effect, although at least a couple of them seem to be a product of scribal inadvertence.
All right. Thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined to another, and 2 covered their bodies. And they went every one straight forward, whither the Spirit was to go. They went, and they turned not when they went. So they just like go forward. And when they turn, they don't turn. They just keep going forward in whatever direction without turning.
I suppose. I'm trying
straight
to
up the road, just straight.
Yeah. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning.
So a lot of stuff going on. I think this is very. I think it's kind of explained in the introductory verse to these. So a storm wind was coming from the north, a great cloud and fire flashing, and radiance all around it.
Now,
That's back in verse 4.
Since Yahweh has this storm god thing going on, like this is very much Yahwistic.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's really not much to say there other than the kind of the storm imagery or the storm wind from the north coming in, and maybe that's why they're not turning at all, because they're part of this wind, I suppose.
Yeah.
They are the wind.
And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. You know, it's interesting that they continually refer to them as living creatures.
Yeah. Okay, so the actual creatures themselves, the things that they look like. So lion, bull, eagle are the ones that Alter translates. These are all heraldic beasts associated with royalty or divinity. The fourth face is human. So verse 10, actually, before we get into that, I just noticed something else. So the result that is obtained can, this is hard to follow because it just kind of hops. It's not the best in order.
Well, we're getting
in terms of
this
order.
general description of these creatures.
Yeah.
Cherubim.
Yeah. So I think they're talking about the text a little bit earlier on here, just for some context. The result that is obtained can now be considered in regard to verses 7 through 11, which have been cut out. And he's referencing this because I think he's thinking of them as later additions, possibly, or just wholly different. It can be seen that the description of the feet in verse 7 and hands in verse 8 of the creatures represents subsequent elaborations. A mention of the hands could have been felt to be necessary from 2:9, where the stretched out hand must certainly be related to Yahweh himself. More probably, however, we must look to the reference in 10:7, which undoubtedly had as a consequence two references to the hands of the cherubim in 10:8 and 10:21. So we get more on these in chapter 10. The gloss, verse 9, has, as we have already mentioned, anticipated what is said in verse 11. He goes into some more Hebrew, some more of the text. The description of the four faces in verse 10 also belongs to a subsequent interpretation. In chapter 10 also, as the counterpart of chapter 1, there is reference to these four faces of the cherubim, that the detailed listing of the faces in 10:14 differs from 1:10 can, in this connection, be an indication that the naming of the four faces was not so firmly fixed that it could simply be inferred from chapter 1.
All right.
So the recognition of the secondary character of the reference in 1:10 possibly leads to a still further conclusion. It is conceivable that the original text mentioned in verse 6 the four faces of each creature without, however, giving any further reference to their form. If the more detailed description in verse 10 is secondary, then could not also verse 6, which anticipates verse 10, here been secondarily introduced? Okay, so this is... I think they are basically, the argument here is that they have taken over a lot of stuff from a different part of the book and kind of interpolated what these beings look like from a different section.
Okay. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold,
Behold.
one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his four faces. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl. Beryl.
Hold on.
Eerdmans.
Which verse is that? Sorry.
That's 16a.
Okay. The look of wheels and their fashioning were like crystallite.
Okay. And they four had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. When they went upon their four sides, and they turned not when they went. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them four.
Yeah, so now we're getting into some, ooh, boy, some weird imagery here.
Yeah, it's trippy.
It really is.
So you've got these wheels with a wheel in the center, and they go on their sides, and they're crystalline with eyes.
So these would be,
Some real cryptic shit.
so, maybe, okay, so the look of the wheels and their fashioning were like crystallite, and a single likeness the faces of them had, and their look and their fashioning as when a wheel is within a wheel, so concentric circles.
Mm-hmm.
On their four sides, as they went, they would go. They did not turn as they went, so they're just going straight. And their rims were filled with eyes. And why is there no commentary on that? I feel like there should be.
Yeah, one would think. It sounds like a DMT trip.
Right?
I guess, yeah, all round the four of them. So I guess you can have some. So it's just a wheel with a bunch of eyes on the outside.
Yeah, this crystalline wheel with eyes.
Okay.
Maybe they mean like
Concentric ones.
facets of the crystalline structure.
I have no idea. And when the creatures went, the wheels went with them.
Well, I haven't gotten.
Okay, yeah, I'm still trying to totally parse this out. So that's verse. What was that?
was
verse 18?
verse 18.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna look in here.
All right, I'll continue on. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go. And the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels.
All right. So the beginning of verse 18, which comes somewhat late after the theme of the similar movement of the wheels and creatures has been introduced in verse 17. Because, yeah, we already had like them going straight and stuff, right? And which gives a description of the outward appearance of the wheels, is awkward and would join better to verse 16. It would suggest a successive elaboration of the addition, and this is supported by the fact that verse 12 simply contains a summary of verse 21, simply contains a summary of verses 19 through 20.
Jason notes that the Ophanim in Enoch are parallel to wheels within a wheel.
Were they? Oh man, I don't even remember that.
Yeah, there's.
I mean, there was a lot in Enoch, right?
There is a lot.
Enoch is all this.
We got the commentaries, but they're all the way at my house. Actually, never mind.
So the point is that these wheels move in tandem with these.
These are basically the creature's vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, is what this sounds like.
Yeah, and they don't turn; they just go forward with the spirit.
Right. I just wish we had more about any of this.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Like there are most definitely reasons why the author wrote it this way. I just want to know what they are.
Yeah, I assume that part of it is, like you noted before, there's a lot of repetition, and it's probably like an incantation type thing, right?
I don't know if it'd be an incantation.
Well, that's what the commentator noted. Incantory, right? It has a poetic feel to it.
Okay, I see what you're okay.
Especially as verses 20 and 21 end the same way, that the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. And the likeness of the firmament was upon the heads of the living creature. Okay, this is worded very strangely. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of the terrible crystal stretched forth over their heads above. So this is like an aura, like a halo effect.
Kind of. That's what I'm getting for.
Right.
So what verse is that one?
That was verse 22.
Okay. And there was a likeness over the heads of the beasts, a platform like the appearance of the fearsome ice stretched over their heads above. So I guess that would be the firmament, right? So a platform that looked like the firmament.
A likeness of the firmament.
Yeah. And beneath, did you continue on that one? And beneath the platform.
And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other, everyone straight, the one toward the other. Everyone had two, which covered on this side, and everyone had two, which covered on that side their bodies.
Okay.
So
this is
it's
sounding
like they're in some kind of a cylinder, right? Where there's a top that's like to the firmament, and then there's these wheels underneath or beside them in some way.
And they're kind of like, are they in a square? Is that what I'm getting at? Because all of their...
I'm thinking more of a tube, like maybe.
I see. Okay.
And they have like almost like statues, right? They just move forward with the spirit. They don't turn. They're described in this kind of static position, but they're still moving.
So let's see here. Let's see how their wing, and beneath the platform, their wings stood straight and toward each other. Each had two covering them, covering their bodies. So are they all pointing all at the same spot? Because like I can see that as a possible one, right? Where like if they're standing in like a square, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like 4 points, they're all pointing their wings like inward. I think I've seen that image.
Well, their wings are up and across their bodies. So they have 4 wings each.
Okay, so
on the left and the right.
Okay.
And the bottom wings are going across their bodies, and the top wings are upwards.
Okay. In a weird way, if you remember how the Ark of the Covenant was sometimes described to be set up.
Yeah, there were these statues of cherubim.
And the wings were touching.
And the wings were touching, yes.
Yeah.
So these are like presenters of God, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what they're going for.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of the great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of a host. When they stood, they let down their wings.
Yeah.
So it's like they were kneeling and still moving forward, and their wings were in this static position, and then they stand, and their wings go down.
Because now the Lord himself is about to come, right? So, that's how you show respect.
Yeah.
You kneel. So yeah, and I heard...
And then they stand for presentation.
Right. And I heard the sound of their wings like the sound of many waters, like the sound of Shaddai. That's the word that's actually used there, Shaddai. Another title for God, as they went.
And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let down their wings. And above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne.
So this is hold on. This is and I know we've talked about this before.
Almost exactly like the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes, especially if you consider well, it's not really my own idea, but Thomas Romer's hypothesis that the Ark of the Covenant was a statue of Yahweh.
Yes. As the appearance of a sapphire stone. So this is a sapphire throne. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above it. So again, this is like a man. It doesn't describe Yahweh in the same way that it describes these cherubim.
But, from, Genesis stuff.
Right.
It's like man.
Made
likeness
in his image.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within it, from the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward. I saw it as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about. So there's just like this huge light in the appearance of a man, and it's above these cherubim.
You know what I just realized?
What?
He has two sections of commentary. The first section is a textual one, and the second section is the interpretation.
Oh, wonderful. Well, maybe you'll see something interesting in there.
All right, I'm going to start flipping through what I missed.
As I finish this last verse. As the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, a rainbow, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. So it's not just a bright light. It's like a light that contains a whole spectrum of colors.
Prismatic.
Yes. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. And that is the end of chapter 1. While Lawrence is looking for commentary, if you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, share it with your friends, family, neighbors, priests, imams.
I think they would all love to hear about this. But also
angelologists.
Yeah, angelologists. You love to hear what those angelologists have to say about this. So when this is going to make this quite a bit easier. So verse 18, that was the one with the eyes on the wheels, right?
Verse 18 does talk about these rings that are wheels that are high and they have eyes round about them.
Yeah, so behind the statement about the eyes, which were on the rims of the wheels, we should probably picture a particular form of wheel decoration or strengthening, which is here interpreted as eyes. Should we think of nailed fitments? Galling mentions a wheel with nail fitments as current in the 7th century, where we must think of fitments to the outsides of the wheel. Okay, I suppose that would make sense. What may have been a special decoration is then interpreted in a deeper sense. In these eyes, we have an indication of the all-seeing power of the rider of the throne chariot. I suppose, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they could have presented that in a different way, but all right. The mysterious description of the wheels could not fail to arouse much later reflection. Yeah, you're telling me, oh, and you know what? Jason, obviously rocking out over there. In later Jewish speculation, the Ophanim are raised to the level of independent angelic beings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there we go. And the references, of course, being to Enoch.
Yes. Now, Golden Gay comments that from the cloud emerge 4 exotic creatures, each with 4 wings and 4 faces, belonging to the highest of the natural species. 4 crisscross wheels stand alongside them. All these features emphasize the mobility of the entourage, which faces and moves in any direction effortlessly along the ground or in the air. It does so as a single united entity, despite the fact that the creatures, wheels, and throne are not physically linked. They are held together by one spirit or will. The description with its repetitions conveys the awesomeness of the vision, the richness of its elements, and the thunder of the sound of the creature's wings beat. Standing above the creature's wheels and linked wings is a gleaming platform and a sapphire blue throne seating a human-like figure of fiery rainbow-like splendor. It basically just points that out. It says the passage's venturesome flights of revelatory imagination led to both becoming suggestive stimuli to meditation over many centuries. Their influence can be seen in Jewish apocalypses, in rabbinic writings of the Talmudic period, and in medieval Jewish mystical writings. For anyone interested in what we would call theology, not least theodicy, or science, they proved an inexhaustible invitation to reflection and discovery. After the fall of the Second Temple, the circle of Yohanan ben Zakkai developed the mystical study of the passages, though also placing restrictions on their study, apparently because of the fancies it could engender and the possibility of encroaching on God's own dangerous realm. In medieval times, only people of Ezekiel's own age or older were allowed to study Ezekiel 1.
Wow.
Yeah, Ezekiel 1 provided Daniel 7 and 10 with ways of envisioning and portraying visionary manifestations. At the end of the Second Temple period, it gave a Christian prophet means of envisioning and portraying the person and presence of God in Revelation 4. It is a statement both of the possibility and of the limitations of that knowledge of Yahweh to which human beings have access.
Yeah, and there are definitely so many links between the imagery in Revelation and Ezekiel.
Now, it's an interesting image overall because it has its parallels in the overall theology, right?
Yeah.
These angelic creatures, there's definitely a hierarchy to them, being as they're all equals, indistinguishable from each other, and above them is Yahweh. So they go into great detail about this like incredible appearance of these heavenly beings, which alone would be like mind-blowing for a human being.
Right. Although it is interesting to note that even in a book that contains imagery like this, there is very noticeably lacking in Ezekiel, as in the entire priestly literature, any mention of hosts.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I'd also like to point out that they mention these firmaments above the heads of these angels.
Well, the likeness.
The likeness of the firmament.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, they have Yahweh, who is literally above the firmaments or the likeness of the firmaments, and Yahweh within the theology would be beyond the firmament within the earthly realm. They also mention these wheels with eyes.
Well, you have to remember that it's his likeness again, right? It's his likeness that is upon this platform.
Right, and there's the likeness
These are
of the firmament.
These are the Platonic forms. That's what they are.
Right.
They are the Platonic forms.
Something like that. But they have this Yahweh who's above, the likeness of Yahweh is above the likeness of the firmament, just as Yahweh is above the firmament. Also, additionally,
and of course, what they're talking about here, this likeness of the firmament, it literally from altar here. It's just he just has as a platform. The Hebrew rakia indicates a flat, pounded out surface. It is derived from a verbal root that means to pound or to stomp. In Genesis 1, it is the word used for the vault of the heavens, more traditionally firmament. So here it figures as a constructed equivalent of the sky. Structurally, the rakia amounts to a beaten slab. So it should be seen as just a flat platform, but for the things that are carrying it, it would be synonymous with the sky, or it would be analogous to the sky.
Now, I don't know if you know, I don't know personally, maybe you do, anything about the significance of the sapphires, because it seems significant that Yahweh would be on a sapphire throne.
Yeah, what verse was that?
That...
Yeah, if you found the verse, since I actually found the part of the commentary that's useful.
That was in verse 26.
Verse 26, okay. He the way he has this split up, even the interpretation commentary is he has it split up in his reconstruction.
Mhm.
So he has it split in two. So verse 26. So the mention of the actual throne follows in verse 26. Then he cites it the comparison with sapphire, or more accurately, perhaps lapis lazuli, and we've actually had that before pop up.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was with I forget if it was in Exodus or Leviticus.
I thought there was a point where Moses meets with Yahweh, and there's some mention of something like that.
Which was reckoned in antiquity by the Greeks and Romans as sapphire, is connected in Exodus 24:10 with the ground under Yahweh's feet. Does this mean that Yahweh was thought to be seated with a footstool beneath his feet, as in the Jerusalem conception? Well, maybe.
It is a blue footstool that's under my feet, but no.
Yeah,
I
so,
don't think it's sapphire.
Ezekiel 126 makes the comparison with the throne itself. Above the transparent crystal of the heavenly platform was the light blue of the divine throne. So is it just sky stuff?
It could be a reference to the sky, right? In Exodus 24:10, it says, "And they saw the God of Israel, and beneath his feet was like a fashioning of sapphire pavement, and like the very heavens for pureness."
Okay.
And Alter commented that mere flesh and blood cannot long sustain the vision of God, and so the visual focus immediately slides down to the celestial brilliance beneath God's feet, even for this zone touched by the divine. Direct linguistic reference is not possible, so the writer uses a double simile, like the fashioning of, like the very heavens. And for sapphire, he notes that it may refer to lapis lazuli. In any case, it refers to something that's blue.
Okay. And yeah, that's of course, the end of the chapter there. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. So I'm going to hand off the commentaries to you. And of course, chapter 2 starts there. Yep. Here you go. You can do with that as you will. And there are quite a lot of commentaries, but you know what? Ezekiel is a very, very interesting book with a lot to say, especially with all this imagery. But we are still in the section of the book that we're still in Ezekiel's call. Or now we are, I guess, more definitively in Ezekiel's call, because this section is headed Ezekiel's call.
Right.
All right, let's hop into it. Ezekiel chapter 2. And he said to me, "Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak with you." Now, of course, this is not Jesus stuff, obviously.
Right. It's a common saying that occurs like in many books.
Yeah, but apparently, God wants to just call this person human.
Right. And
Hello, human.
it's an antithetical relation, Alter comments, to the creatures of the divine chariot who are not mortal humans. Alter doesn't translate it as Son of Man because after the Gospels, that designation took on Christological connotations.
Yeah.
But Eerdman, not Eerdman's, the Hermenia commentary notes that a couple things. That Yahweh's message, his name isn't mentioned, although the voice of someone speaking is referred to cautiously and helps to preserve the mystery of the deity hidden in the manifestations of his glory. Also, Son of Man occurs 93 times in the book of Ezekiel.
Hey, you know what? When the only name God has for you is human, that's what he's going to go with, I suppose.
Yeah. Also, it says here, we ought to avoid the weak translation "child of man," in which Durr wants to take a note of tenderness. It is certainly wrong to seek to find here use of a custom of Babylonian speech, by a reference to Gilgamesh, where Ea addresses the hero of the flood as man, Amelu.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty weak, honestly, because it's just human.
Right.
You can't link something off of just the word human,
But
off of a title human.
But Ezekiel's background in the realm of priestly language, which often uses Adam as the subject of a ruling in Leviticus 1:2, 13:2, and Numbers 19:14, in its legal formulations, is quite sufficient to explain Ezekiel's usage.
All right. So, son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak with you. And as he spoke to me, the Spirit entered into me and set me on my feet. And I heard him speaking to me. And he said to me, Son of man, I send you to the people of Israel, to nations of rebels who have rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me to this very day.
So, like the cherubim, Ezekiel is now inhabited by the Spirit, and like the cherubim, his motions are now dictated by the Spirit.
Yeah, essentially. The descendants also are impudent and stubborn. I send you to them, and you shall say to them, Thus says the Lord God. And whether they hear or refuse to hear, for they are a rebellious house.
Oh, also, the Spirit entering him can be an allusion to Genesis, where God breathes the Spirit into Adam.
Okay. That does make sense, but I like for they are a rebellious house. Are they talking about, okay, so they're just talking about the whole house of Israel here.
Yes.
Because he's going to send them to the people of Israel.
Yeah.
But also to nations, hold on, sorry. To nations of rebels who have rebelled against me. So if that's a designation for Israel as well, then, talking about them in an exilic time, then it would make sense why he's calling them a rebellious house.
Yeah. Hermenia comments, the house of Israel, we must bear in mind, first of all, that Israel is the proper name for the people of God and their 12 tribes, who concisely belong to God through the covenant. As far as the people's spiritual character was concerned, the name Israel did not fall into disuse, even when, historically speaking, it only concerned the remnant of Israel, which could be defined in political terms as Judah, to distinguish it from the political kingdom of Israel.
So, then whether they hear or refuse, refuse to hear, for they are a rebellious house, they will know that a prophet has been among them.
Also, Alter translates this as, I am sending you to the Israelites, to the rebellious nations. Right?
Okay.
First of all, nations has its own connotation within the Bible.
Yeah.
But the designation of the Israelites as nations in the plural is peculiar. Some think it refers to the tribes, but they're not elsewhere called nations.
Right.
Perhaps the plural is meant to encompass both the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. While the northern kingdom has long been destroyed, the verbal phrase, have rebelled against me, invokes past actions, and Ezekiel may also be imagining a virtual presence of the vanished kingdom, as Jeremiah sometimes does.
I would have thought that the designation of Israel as nations here would be referencing, okay, so you have an exilic period, right, where they have now become the enemies, essentially, because they have, we already know that at this time Israel was very synchronistic. So maybe this is like kind of like a mocking kind of thing. Like they are rebellious, therefore they have become the nations. They become part of the nations. That would have been my take.
Yeah, it can be the case. Obviously, we know that they did adopt the practices of some others. And outright, I mean, in the last chapters of Jeremiah, like, rejects the direct word of God.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. And you, son of man, be not afraid of them, nor be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns are with you, and you sit on scorpions. So there is a note for that. Or on scorpion plants.
Among scorpions you dwell, Alter says.
Oh, okay.
What verse is that?
That is verse 6, yes.
Okay.
I'm going to finish the verse, though, while you find it. Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks, for they are a rebellious house.
So there's more parallels with Jeremiah here. Jeremiah, we find with Jeremiah the encouraging, fear not, for I am with you, Jeremiah 1:8, and to the despairing prophet, and the admonitory, do not be afraid of them, lest I give you cause to fear them, 1:17b, uttered against the prophet's desire to evade his commission. In Ezekiel, the admonition to be fearless is quite abruptly set within the message of Israel's unreadiness to repent, which is basically neither an argument intended to encourage nor a threat intended to preclude any evasion. Twice the admonition not to be afraid is formulated using two different expressions. In verse 6b, there are various references to the reactions of the prophet's hearers, of which men might well be afraid. In the second formulation, the reference to the hardening of the people is made with the formula taken from verse 5, for they are a rebellious house. In order to grasp fully the logical progression of thought, we must add here, as in verse 6a, a thought which is unexpressed. Do not be afraid of them, though there is good cause to fear them, for they are a rebellious house. The causal clause does not, in fact, provide a motive for fearlessness, but establishes that fear might well be aroused. This is even clearer in the causal clause of verse 6a, though thorns are round about you, you sit on scorpions. Mm-hmm. In the first statement, the two ideas are connected. One, danger surrounds the prophet on all sides, so that no escape is possible from this encirclement. The impossibility of evasion is given by the expression roundabout. Two, in saying about thorns, which suggests a fence with a thorn hedge, we can see the complete hostility, even to the point of torture and bloodshed, of those to whom God's messenger is sent. Even stranger is the second simile of sitting on scorpions, which Ezekiel is to encounter in the fulfillment of his prophetic office.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
And you shall speak my words to them, whether they hear or refuse to hear, for they are a rebellious house. But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Be not rebellious like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. And when I looked, behold!
Behold!
A hand was stretched out to me, and behold!
Behold!
A scroll of a book was in it, and he spread it before me, and it had writing on the front and on the back, and there were written on it words of lamentation and mourning and woe. So the scroll that he's meant to eat, he's not literally eating a scroll, right? This is take in my words, what I say, and take them seriously. And there Chris goes eating some paper.
Yeah.
There he swallowed the whole thing. I just watched him do it, guys.
Well, Golden Gaze says that he eats a scroll.
Yeah.
Alter says
He's not literally eating the scroll.
Alter says other prophets are bid to perform symbolic acts, but this one is extreme and characteristic of Ezekiel. He has just been told not to be rebellious like his countrymen. Now he is asked to show his total submission by ingesting a scroll. Again, this appears to reflect Ezekiel's aberrant psychology. God does not inform him what he is to eat until the mysterious hand appears with the scroll. It was now with this writing on the scroll, it's written on both sides. Mm-hmm. Now, as Menachem Haran has noted, this means the scroll was papyrus, not parchment, because the way animal skins were prepared for scrolls in this period precluded writing on both sides. It would, of course, be considerably easier to ingest papyrus than parchment. So You might not think that
that
he literally
what
eats
I'm
a
saying,
scroll.
what I'm saying is that in the vision he would be literally eating a scroll.
Yeah,
but because it's a vision, the symbolic act, the thing that it's meant to portray is the devotion and following him.
Right.
Yep.
But like the image is literally of him eating a scroll.
Right, but it's
Of
in
papyrus.
but it's in a vision.
Yeah. But that's the end.
Yeah, that is the end. And he's still kind of going. I don't really know why the chapter division is like this here, but it is what it is. So before we hop into chapter 3 and continue this call, Ruben, do you hear something?
I hear it, and I see these.
It's
Behold, I am your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and I want to let all you heathens and sinners know that I support this wonderful episode of Atheist Sunday School. Lawrence and Reuben try their very best to bring you the true glory of the Bible, and they need your help. They have provided links to their Patreon page and other social media just for you. Once again, my name is Jesus Christ, and this is Milwaukee Atheists. The Lord is with them. God bless.
Oh my God, Jesus! I have, Son of Man, human, I have become blinded by your light. I see nothing. It's really dark now. I hope everyone's doing well, because Son of Man has descended, and now I don't see, and I really think
We'll never know we're on chapter 3.
no. I would remember that we just did chapter 2, so I would now know that we are at chapter 3. I see my numbers still exist.
Even if you're blind. Why don't you try opening your eyes? Wow.
This is weird. My eyes have been opened.
Wow. It's almost like Ruben's back.
Oh my God, Ruben.
I have this strange compulsion. I have to flip back to Lamentations and eat the chapter.
Well, we know what happened to you.
Somebody's hungry for some sadness.
Lamentations, mourning, and woe. My
Someone's
favorite.
Someone's been talking to God.
Yeah, you can always tell.
When you go off and eat a scroll, it shows that you've been talking to God.
Right.
But yeah, now we're hopping into chapter 3, which is the continuation of this. Like, he's still talking to God here. This is still part of the vision. Nothing has actually changed. It's just a different number in front of the words.
Okay, continuing on then. Chapter 3. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest. Eat this roll, and go speak unto the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then I did eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness.
So such specification indicates that the prophet is not merely meant to chew the papyrus scroll, but to swallow it and digest it. It seems quite likely that Ezekiel believed he had been commanded to perform this difficult symbolic act.
But it's delicious. It's sweet like honey.
It's free real estate.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. Did not see that coming.
So a lot like the manna that we talked about
Yeah.
in Wisdom of Solomon and Exodus, it doesn't taste like you would think it would taste.
No, it's one of those like Japanese game shows where people bite onto things, and sometimes it turns out to be like a chocolate or a candy, and other times it's still just the same object.
Yeah.
And you have to guess before you bite it. Yeah. So he handed him like a sweet roll, but it looks like a scroll.
It looks like a scroll.
That's right.
Yeah.
But also, the whole land of milk and honey thing. Maybe there's a connection
Sure,
there.
yeah.
Oh man, I wonder if there was ever like a cultic practice where they literally had people eating papyrus scrolls.
Oh my God, I have no idea.
That would have been nuts.
Yeah.
Scroll eaters.
Yeah.
I'm going to add them as a faction in some game of mine.
Okay. And he said unto me, Son of man, go, get thee unto the house of Israel, and speak my words unto them. For thou art not sent to a people of a strange speech and of a hard language, but to the house of Israel.
Oh, I actually have more on the tasting of this. So it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. This reference is not to be understood as a description of the content of the divine message, in which a promise of salvation follows after the announcement of judgment. In the language of the Psalms, the statement that Yahweh's words is sweeter than honey is used several times. Psalm 19:11, also I think this is, I forget how long Psalm 19 is, but, and then 119, 103. I think that's how he divides these. This is very poorly sectioned off. In general, Ezekiel shows little contact with the language of the Psalter, whereas W. Baumgartner has, I think that's Walter Baumgartner, I could be wrong, has demonstrated that in his laments, the prophet Jeremiah is strongly influenced by the Psalms. These laments we find, okay, so he's linking up the same kind of lamentation of Jeremiah to Ezekiel, saying that, let's see, the sweetness of God's word is mentioned here without the simile of honey. So in Jeremiah 15, once again, there's the sweetness of God's word. So I guess this is just the more specific way of saying that it's sweet.
So if you'll recall in my Quran video, I had mentioned that there were these ecstatic seers, right? These soothsayers who would deliver their statements in poetry. Now, it sounds like here Ezekiel is being delivered the word of God in the form of lamentations, right? Which are a kind of poetry, and that his like prophetic ability is to be apparent in these like holy verses that are revealed to him that he delivers like as a poet. Right.
Yeah, I see the link there. Not necessarily like a scroll eating thing, but
right.
Yeah.
Anyways, so not to many people of a strange speech and of a hard language, whose words thou canst not understand. Surely, had I sent thee to them, they would have hearkened unto thee. But the house of Israel will not hearken unto thee.
Oh, so the was that verse 5?
That was verse 6.
Okay, with the unintelligible thing. So go to the house of Israel and speak to them my words, for not to a people of unfathomable language and an obscure tongue do I send you. So the commentary here from Hermenia, this takes place through a comparison with the surrounding world. Ezekiel is not sent to a people of foreign speech, literally, deep, unintelligible in its speech. That's the literal phrasing there.
Yeah. So, but the house of Israel will not hearken unto thee, for they will not hearken unto me. For all the house of Israel are impudent and hard-hearted. Behold!
Behold!
I have made thy face strong against their faces, and thy forehead strong against their foreheads. As an adamant, harder than flint, have I made thy forehead. Fear them not, neither be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house.
There's the power of the strong forehead. People always like to say that you might have a strong chin, but you don't. And you don't even want that. You have a strong forehead. That's what you want.
Yeah. And also he mentions the hard-heartedness of the Israelites, which might be calling back to that motif with Pharaoh, where his heart was hardened. But
or maybe the stiff-necked thing.
Yeah. But here he's essentially saying they're going to be stubborn, but don't worry, because I made you stubborn too. Moreover, he said unto Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, all my words that I shall speak unto thee, receive in thine heart, and hear with thine ears, and go. Get thee to them of the captivity, unto the children of thy people, and speak unto them, and tell them, Thus saith the Lord God, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. Then the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind me a voice of a great rushing, saying, Blessed be the glory of the Lord from his place. I heard also
A great rushing?
a great rushing.
Okay, so it sounds like in this section he's getting he's not necessarily ascending because it's still in a vision.
He's being raised up.
Yeah, so in particular we have a mention here of the prophet being lifted up by it. We must compare this with the mention in the earlier prophetic narratives of the fear of Ahab's steward Obadiah, who says to Elijah, As soon as I have gone from you, the Spirit of Yahweh will carry you whither I know not, and so he will kill me. Because the word that's used there for lifted up is the same as to raise or to carry off. The particular nuance of the statement, which ought not to be removed by text-critical procedures, consists in the prophet's not being allowed to become simply a spectator of the departure of the divine manifestation. The Spirit carries the prophet away so that he hears the sound of Yahweh's departure only in the mysterious roaring behind him. And they speculate that maybe it's an earthquake, but it doesn't really matter. It's danger.
Right. Act of nature.
The danger zone?
Yes, the danger zone.
Highway to the danger zone. Anyways, I heard also the noise of the wings of the living creatures that touched one another, and the noise of the wheels over against them, and a noise of a great rushing. So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heat of my spirit, but the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. Then I came to them of the captivity at Tel Abib, that dwelt by the river of Chebar, and I sat where they sat, and remained there astonished among them 7 days. And it came to pass at the end of 7 days, that the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word at my mouth, and give them a warning from me. When I say unto the wicked, Thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. Yet, if thou warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. Again, when a righteous man doth turn from his righteousness and commit iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die, because thou hast not given him warning. He shall die in his sin, and his righteousness which he hath done shall not be remembered, but his blood will I require at thine hand.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Nevertheless, if thou warn the righteous man that the righteous sin not, and he doth not sin, he shall surely live, because he is warned. Also, thou hast delivered thy soul. So, Eerdman's comments...
There's quite a lot here. First, I want to just point out the connection there to Tel Abib, right?
Mhm.
That was...
the location.
Yeah. So, and I came to the exiles at Tel Abib who dwelled by the Kabar Canal, where they dwelled. So, in connection with this, the location of the exiles to whom Ezekiel belonged is mentioned for the first and only time. They dwelt in Tel Abib. In its form, the name is undoubtedly to be connected with the settlements of the exiles. Then it lists two settlements in Hebrew, but they're mentioned in Ezra 259 and Nehemiah 761. Oh, okay. So this is how old this is. This guy's still referencing Albright. So William Albright suggests an interpretation of the name found in Nehemiah from the Akkadian Malahu as Hill of Sailors. To ears familiar with Hebrew, this would have been interpreted as Salt Hill. Tel Aviv would have been understood from the Hebrew as Hill of Ears. However, the name is scarcely to be separated from the Akkadian word Til Abubi, mentioned in Codex Hammurabi, and in the Annals of Tiglath-Pileser. In these examples, it means a ruined hill of the flood, i.e. a very ancient hill. What must have been, in the mouths of the Babylonian population, a description of one of the uninhabited mounds of an old city, was understood as a proper name by the exiles to whom the place was assigned as a settlement by the Babylonian administration. The locality must be sought near to the Canal Kabar in the vicinity of Nippur. And here are, because he's referencing Albright, I'm always a little bit hesitant there. I'm going to just mention, let's see what Alter has to say about this. Though this looks like a Hebrew name, mound of the sprouting season, and modern-day Tel Aviv drew the name from here, it is actually Akkadian and means mound of the flood. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty close.
Okay.
And Tel Aviv drew the name from there. That's pretty great. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Now, Golden Gay says, Ezekiel has his attention drawn to a distinction within the community between the people who characteristically live right lives and those who do not. The distinction is then admittedly deconstructed. It becomes one between people who do wrong, but might stop, and people who do right, but might stop. It is of no use to have the people reassuring themselves that they belong to the law-abiding group unless they are thoroughly consistent with their commitment. Yet there is a difference between the approach Yahweh's word takes to habitual and to occasional wrongdoers. There is no specific reference to the possibility that the former may turn. There is something fixed about their character. There is a specific reference to the possibility that the latter may turn. There's also something consistent about their character. So Ezekiel's ministry to the two groups has different functions. In relation to the former, it is to vindicate Yahweh's fairness in punishment. In relation to the latter, it is to halt between intent and action so that they do not incur punishment. From the difference in people's response to him, it has been inferred that he explicitly ministered to individuals, but more likely this is no more the case than is with a lookout. If Ezekiel fails to make his warning heard in the ears of people who have long done wrong, or who now turn to doing wrong, and they, as a result, lose their lives, he is in effect guilty of murder and is liable to the same fate. If he does warn them, they are responsible for their own fate. A stumbling block is something which makes someone fall. The word appears more in Ezekiel than in the whole of the rest of the Old Testament.
Wow, because we've already seen it pop up a lot.
Yeah. Here...
and such will be a stumbling block.
Right. Here, it might simply mean that Yahweh sends the calamity which brings in judgment on the wrongdoer. But it would be characteristic of Ezekiel to mean that Yahweh also sent whatever led the person into wrongdoing. That is how seriously Ezekiel takes Yahweh's sovereignty. It's part of his explanation of the mystery of human perversity, whereby we are capable of making such manifestly foolish choices. Yet he takes human responsibility seriously. We're challenged and able to resist temptation. So I'll continue on.
What verse are you on?
22.
Okay.
And the hand of the Lord was there upon me, and he said unto me, Arise, go forth to the plain, and I will there talk with thee. Then I arose and went forth to the plain, and behold,
Behold!
the glory of the Lord stood there, as the glory which I saw by the river of Chebar, and I fell upon my face. Then the Spirit entered into me, and set me upon my feet, and spake with me, and said unto me, Go, shut thyself within thine house. But thou, O son of man, behold,
Behold!
they shall put bands on thee, and shall bind thee with them, and thou shalt not go out among them. And I will make thy tongue cleave to the roof of thy mouth, that thou shalt be dumb, and shall not be to them a reprover. For they are a rebellious house. But when I speak with thee, I will open thy mouth, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, He that heareth, let him hear, and he that forbeareth, let him forbear, for they are a rebellious house. And that is the end of chapter 3.
If you guys are enjoying the stream so far, make sure to drop a like if you haven't, because it really does help us out. Subscribe if you haven't, because I don't even know why you're watching this if you're not subscribed. Who are you even? Make sure to subscribe.
I'm a rando. I'm just watching this for fun.
Jeez. Man, okay. And the way that it is set up in Hermenia is really strange, but it's mostly because of the way their textual reconstruction.
Yes.
Thinking that something would make more sense here, like this, something or other is out of place. So it is, weird to follow along.
All right. So this next chapter that we're going into, it
Also,
it's
very short for Lawrence, right?
Yeah, relatively.
Yeah.
It's talking about the sieging of Jerusalem again. It's a dramatic reconstruction, and Golden Gate references some.
And as mentioned before, pretty much we're seeing a lot of the stuff that we saw in other prophets, right? But it's amped up.
Yes.
So this is going to be another one of those cases where you're talking about the exile, you're talking about the siege of Jerusalem, but I'm guessing it's going to be amped up.
Yeah, it's going to be very it'll be reminiscent of Jeremiah.
Of course.
Right. But
Justin, thank you for the $5. You aren't short. Okay.
I mean, compared to people who are short, Lawrence is not.
Did someone say I was short?
Average height.
Did someone say I was
I
short?
think you were. Yeah, you're average height.
I mean, yeah, I guess average would be right. Yeah,
Yep.
like what, 5'6"?
5'6".
Oh, that's below average.
All right, well that's fine too.
That's not exactly.
It's not a lot below
short.
average.
No, it's not super below
I'm
average.
considered tall, and that's not exactly short, coming from my perspective.
I don't
that
know.
doesn't count for much, but here it is.
Was someone talking about what my height?
Maybe.
Either way, thanks for
Yes, thank you for the $5. We really appreciate it, Justin.
The 666 donation drive. You two can find out which one of us is the clearest when we buy one of those Scientology
E-meters, yeah.
Thetan meter. Yeah, we'll tell you all about it.
I think it'd be a lot of fun. Either way, let's hop into chapter 4.
He had no idea what to type.
You know what? That's a perfectly fine
That's
reason
great.
to write anything. All right. Let's hop into chapter 4, unless you have something to
Go ahead.
introduce this. All right. And you, son of man, take a brick and lay it before you and engrave on it a city, even Jerusalem. So, okay, this is kind of reminiscent of the setting up the stones when they come back, right?
Yeah, so Alter comments, bricks were the building material of choice in the Mesopotamian Valley.
What? Bricks?
Right.
Build a house out of bricks. That's crazy.
Right. Whereas stone was more commonly used in the mountainous regions of Judah. Compare the use of bricks in the story of the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11. The incising would have been done before the firing of the brick. A brick with the depiction of a Babylonian city of Nippur was actually discovered in an archaeological dig. So this might have been one artistic motif or method of drawing plans for a city. Hermenia comments that the command comes from Yahweh to Ezekiel to take a clay brick and draw it upon the plan of a city. C.G. Howie has pointed out that we can see local Babylonian coloring here. Akkadian Libitu from Labanu, making flat, there's a Hebrew word that correlates with there, refers to an air-dried brick and not to one that has been fired. Genesis 11:3 shows that to the Israelite mind, such a type of brick belonged in a special way to the Babylonian plain. Against this, Ezekiel has pointed out that clay bricks are referred to apart from Genesis 11:3 in regard to forced labor in Egypt and also in connection with building in Palestine. We must not overlook, however, that drawing the outline of houses, temples, and boats on bricks and tablets is attested in Babylon from an early period. Among the half dozen or so city plans, there's actually one for the city of Nippur, which is not far from Ezekiel by the river Chebar. In Palestine, we know nothing of such a use of clay bricks, nor of the form of city plans. Here, ostracra and papyrus were the usual writing materials.
Yeah, and this is the kind of stuff that gives scholars like a great idea about the date, and also about where it was written. Like, what was the culture of the time? Like, if you're talking about bricks and not like some other building material, then you would think, well, where were they using bricks and not the other building materials?
Right. So this is like a Babylonianism introduced.
Well, it's just like a way that they did it in that kind of region, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So not necessarily Babylonian, but certainly the ancient Near Eastern culture is just seeping through because that's just what people did back then. That's just how they did it.
All right, carry on.
All right. And put siege works against it, and build a siege wall against it, and cast up a mound against it. Set camps also against it, and plant battering rams against it all around. So are they just saying also, along with the plans, you draw the plans for its destruction?
Yeah.
Okay. And you take an iron girdle, or griddle, that's what it says here, griddle, and place it as an iron wall between you and the city.
Now, in the playing with models and symbols, Ezekiel takes on the role of God, estranged from the city, a condition represented by the interposed iron wall.
And place it as an iron wall between you and the city, and set your face toward it, and let it be in a state of siege, and press the siege against it. This is a sign for the house of Israel. So he's weirdly putting this all on Ezekiel.
Right, and this griddle also would be used in the cooking of clay bricks.
Okay.
So,
I see. So yeah, it's really weird that he's not really giving him the power to do it, right? Because it's still God doing it. But he's like channeling it, I guess.
Yeah, so according to Jeremiah 1:18, Yahweh says to Jeremiah in an expansion of the call narrative, which we have already noted influenced Ezekiel, and behold, you don't have to say behold, it's a quote from a commentary, I make you this day a fortified city, an iron pillar, and bronze walls against the whole land. If this saying to Jeremiah was intended to affirm the prophet's protection from his enemies and was therefore meant defensively, it has undergone a change of meaning here and taken an offensive character. It has become a picture of the severity of the divine assault on Jerusalem. Whereas with Jeremiah, it was simply a metaphor. In Ezekiel's sign action with the iron griddle, it has assumed a visual realization, even though still only symbolic.
All right. Verse 4. Then lie on your left side and place the punishment of the house of Israel upon it. For the number of the days that you lie on it, you shall bear their punishment. For I assign to you a number of days, 390, equal to the number of the years of their punishment.
So,
wow, this is... Yeah, so, let me finish the verse.
yeah.
So long shall you bear the punishment of the house of Israel. Wow, all right.
Yeah, so this is an instance in which the borderline between the symbolic act and psychological aberration in Ezekiel is blurred. If, as seems likely, he actually performed this act, he would have been in a state of paralysis, hysterically induced, lying on one side for almost 13 months. The idiom bear guilt has several different meanings in biblical usage, but the most likely one here is that the prophet symbolically takes on himself the guilt. The word can also indicate punishment of his offending people. This 390 is the number of years if one calculates from the erection of the temple around 970 BCE. It takes us forward to 580 BCE, which falls within the period of Ezekiel's prophecy in Babylonia. Moshe Greenberg observes that in accordance with the viewpoint of the Deuteronomist, the existence of the high places outside Jerusalem throughout this period would define the entire span of nearly 4 centuries as a time when guilt was incurred. Now, Eerdmans comments that the 390 years might make the audience think first of the whole history of the temple. Then, when Ezekiel goes on to refer to Judah as opposed to Israel, it might also make them think of the whole history of northern Israel's independent existence, periods which actually begin around 970 BC and 930 BC. Though such knowledge on guilt and liability to punishment, though such knowledge on their part cannot be presumed, both are long years of guilt and liability to punishment. Awan covers wrongdoing and liability to punishment. Northern Israel's years of actual punishment might be seen as beginning with the state's subservience and fall between 733 and 721. Thus, the Septuagint reads 190 years here. The imminent 40 years for Judah takes up a standard symbolic/round figure. There may also be something symbolic about these 390 years, for 390 and 40 add up to the 430 years of Egyptian oppression. It is characteristic of biblical numbers to reflect resonances such as this, at least as much as to imply precise historical calculation.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough call there.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, I mean, I don't know. A lot of people think this is like very mystical stuff.
Yeah,
I don't really buy that.
Well, there is a lot of numerology.
Yeah. I mean, people use it that way, but that doesn't tell you anything.
Well, the rabbis use it that way.
Yeah, but it doesn't really tell you anything about
the original authors. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
tell me when you get to the end of verse 8.
Okay. And when you have completed these, you shall lie down a second time, but on your right side, and bear the punishment of the house of Judah. 40 days I assign you, a day for each year, and you shall set your face toward the siege of Jerusalem with your arm barred, and you shall prophesy against the city. And behold, I will place cords upon you so that you cannot turn from one side to the other till you have completed the days of your siege. That is the end of verse 8.
Okay. So verses 4 through 8, like chapter 3, verses 25 through 27, is to be regarded as made up of additions and later interpretations of the prophet's words and traditions of the school. With this, we must accept, as with chapter 3, verses 25 through 27, that this addition worked with genuine elements of the Ezekiel tradition. Even though their use in the present connection belongs within the secondary expansion, similarly, it appears probable that we're not dealing with one single addition made at one time, but that several phases of such activity are discernible in the different numbers given in Masoretic and Greek, which are not simple scribal errors. We can follow still further the interpretive work which molded the text. So it says more about that, but we basically covered that. It's a numerological thing, or it's a calculation based off of historical events that mean to refer to the sins of Judah and Israel, and possibly to the total period of subjugation under the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm. It'd be a weird thing to reference the. I guess it wouldn't be too weird to reference the Egyptians there, but because of the relationship, how they would view Babylon. So, because I mean, Babylon was used to talk about Rome in Revelation, right? So, like something like that is not too crazy. But I don't know why it's. Yeah, I don't know why it's exactly this way.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different calculations which are in the Hermenia commentary.
Okay.
Some reference that in the Greek, it's 190, and the Masoretic, it's 390 days.
Okay.
This reveals a clear interest in detailed reckoning of the guilt and correspondence between the scale of the guilt and the length of substitutionary sin-bearing. The scale of reckoning runs a day for a year. The priestly document shows very clearly the presence of such a scale in its own views of history. Numbers 14:34 recounts, in the context of the narrative of the spies, the divine punishment on the people who complain. The J tradition already included the idea that the people had been compelled to remain in the desert as a punishment until the generation of the Exodus died out.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that when it comes to documentary hypothesis stuff, the names now, like the titles, J.E., all those, they basically just refer to the composition and not what they originally would have stood for.
Right.
So it's just kind of like, yeah. But at this time, it actually would have still been very well accepted, where you have the older J and E coming together, and then coming together with a priestly source, and then later a Deuteronomist. Although, I mean, that's not really the one that I accept. I go more supplementary hypothesis. At least that's the closest way to put it. Everyone's a little bit different.
There's also a possible chronological reckoning that the fall of Jerusalem takes place almost 390 years after the ascension of Solomon.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah,
I don't know.
387 or 388.
Okay. I guess so. Lots of different possibilities, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially when you have like the margin of error of, I don't know, 10 years maybe.
I also want to note this commentary has commentary on verses 4 through 8, then commentary on verse 4, then commentary on verse 7, then commentary on verse 8, then commentary on verse 5.
Yeah, because that's the reconstruction.
Yeah. It kind of sucks.
Yeah, it makes it hard to follow along. I know. Let's continuing on here with verse 9.
Mm-hmm.
And you take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and emmer.
Millet is another kind of plant.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I feed it to my parakeet.
Oh, all right. Yeah, it just says a type of wheat.
Yeah. Although one
That's for
American Christian group actually markets bread purportedly made from this recipe, it is in fact siege bread made not from wheat, but from a combination of grains and legumes because of the lack of sufficient wheat supplies. The Talmud reports an experiment in which the bread was made with these ingredients and a dog wouldn't touch it.
That's funny. So they put all this stuff together and put them into a single vessel and make your bread from them.
Yeah, so some commentary on these ingredients. Wheat, there's no commentary on it. Barley,
Oh my God. No commentary on wheat.
yeah. Barley.
Could you imagine just like a Wikipedia page of wheat? Just
Yeah. For Palestine, as for Babylonia, wheat and barley were the most important cereals. Herodotus and Strabo praise the richness of Babylonia. Quote, this land produces barley like no other, for it yields 300-fold according to reports. Beans, according to 2 Samuel 17:28, they were among the means of sustenance brought to David in East Jordan. Lentils, 2 Samuel 23:11 refers to a battle in the field of lentils during David's Philistine wars. Also Genesis 25:34, 2 Samuel 17:28. In the latter reference, as in Ezekiel 4:9, the items are listed in pairs, wheat and barley, beans and lentils. Millet is only mentioned here in the Old Testament. For Mesopotamia is known not only through literary references, but also directly through the find of millet seeds in late Assyrian sarcophagi. Spelt. It takes its name from its cropped beard. In Exodus 9:32, it's mentioned in Egypt, together with wheat, as a crop that ripens late in comparison with flax and barley, which ripen early. In 28-25, it shows that spelt was planted as a border to wheat and barley in the fields.
During the number of days that you lie on your side, 390 days, you shall eat it. And your food that you eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. From day to day you shall eat it.
So by some calculations, this is no more than 8 ounces, a very scant daily ration.
Yeah, I'd say so. And it's shitty bread, apparently.
Yeah.
And water you shall drink by measure, the 6th part of a hin. The note here is a hin was about 4 quarts or 3.5 liters.
Mm-hmm.
From day to day you shall drink.
Yeah, you're about, in verse 12, it gets very...
Does it? Okay,
Yeah.
We'll find out. And you shall eat it as a barley cake, baking it in their sight on human dung.
Yes, it shall be baked on the turds of human excrement before your eyes, according to Alter.
Huh.
He says, dried animal dung was commonly used for fuel, but not human excrement. Thus, the baking manifests the condition of the exiles constrained to live in an unclean or defiled land, which is how foreign territory was conceived.
I would say it is unclean if you did that. That gets the point across.
Also, this is plural addressed to the exiles, not the prophet, so he's supposed to bake this on human dung in front of other people.
Okay. And the Lord said, "Thus shall the people of Israel eat their bread unclean among the nations where I will drive them." So yeah, they're gonna be exiled, and then they're not gonna like it because they're gonna have to eat off of human shit.
Yeah.
Um,
And obviously for Ezekiel, who's a priest, this would be
done now.
especially
Heinous.
erroneous.
Then I said, Lord God.
That's an appropriate response.
Hold on. This is the first thing that Ezekiel is saying to God.
Yeah. The first response that he has is
So
like,
all of that is,
hold on there. You're telling me to bake shitty bread on shit. I'm not a fan of this idea.
all the other stuff was fine, but this is too much. Yes. Lord God, behold.
Behold.
I have never defiled myself from my mouth up till now. Sorry, from my youth. I misread that. From my youth up till now, I have never eaten what died of itself or was torn by beasts, nor has tainted meat come into my mouth. So he was, very priestly the whole time, I'm guessing.
Yeah, the flesh of dead animals is mentioned in DTN.
Dude, that's Deuteronomy.
Yeah, I've never seen
Deuteronomic or something like that. Yeah.
written DTN though.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's how they do it by compositions or by author. Like they have it split up. Sometimes they use D, DTR, DTN. Yeah.
Yeah. It says Deuteronomy 14:21, Leviticus 17:15, and other passages.
Okay, so that's not even referring to the author; it's just to the book. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
interesting. That one's more uncommon. So yeah, he has been pretty much priestly the whole time, is what he's going for.
Well, the prophet's words, which express a very definite ideal of purity, reveal as their background the formula of a negative confession of guilt, rather a protestation of innocence voiced in negative statements, which lists in a fixed series specific typical offenses. We compare as a parallel the liturgical prayer of Deuteronomy 26:13 through 15, which contains in verse 14a a corresponding negative series of statements. A comparison with Ezekiel shows a certain freer mode of expression and a stronger personal note, which sets more in the background the fixed summary formulations.
So, although this isn't, I don't think this is directly related here in any causal sort of way, but with the whole denial of the the thing that reminds me of the Hall of the Double Truth in Egyptian mythology. How you get into this chamber where you are talking to a bunch of gods, and you're like, hey, hail this god over here. I haven't, cheated on my wife. Hail this guy over here. I haven't ever stolen anything. And you do that like 42 times, I think. Is it 42 or is it 40 something? Quite a lot of times. Quite a lot of times. It's called the Hall of the Double Truth. I go over it in my Egyptian afterlife video. So I don't think there's a direct relation here because it's certainly not enough to even show that. It's just one thing. And saying that you didn't do something is whatever. That doesn't.
Right. Yeah, and like Donald Goodall says, there is a related scene in Acts where...
Yeah, there a lot of the imagery comes back up. Yeah. Then he said to me, "See, I assign to you cow's dung instead of human dung, on which you may prepare your bread." And as we discussed, that was a more common way, I suppose.
Right. Alter says, seeing the prophet's visceral revulsion, God offers a compromise, but the bread is still baked on filth. Now, Golden Gate says instead that cooking on animal dung is normal in the Middle East. Human dung would work as well, but it might be more repulsive and would be ritually polluting. God's command for its use makes the point about the inevitable defilement involved in transportation to a foreign land.
So yeah, he gets cow's dung to prepare his stuff on. Moreover, he said to me, "Son of man, behold!
Behold!
I will break the supply of bread in Jerusalem. They shall eat bread by weight and with anxiety, and they shall drink water by measure and in dismay." Actually, I'm just now reminding myself of this, but the stuff about rationing things, that's stuff that comes up. Like these are dire times. That's why they have to ration things. These aren't times of starvation, but of famine.
Right. Alter translates this as break the staff of bread in Jerusalem. He says bread is a staff because it supports or sustains life, and in biblical Hebrew, as in many other languages, is a synodoke for food in general. The obvious reference is to the condition of near starvation in the time of siege, and so this element of prophecy is linked with the model siege of verses 1 through 3. The phrase, break the staff of bread, is taken from the dire prediction of disaster in Leviticus 26 if Israel abandons God's ways, and other phrases from that passage in Leviticus are also invoked here.
Yeah. I will do this that they may lack bread and water and look at one another in dismay and rot away because of their punishment. So yeah, back to the whole, this is part of the punishment.
Yes. And
Matthew, man, hope you're okay. Volcano, and volcanic winter type stuff. I know that's probably not actually that, but from what I am seeing that you have typed, just completely turned into night. That sucks, man.
Wow, yeah, I heard a volcano went off around there too. That sucks.
Man, that's horrible.
Try to stay indoors and keep the windows closed.
Yeah, don't get any of that ash in
wear 3 masks.
Yeah. Don't breathe it if you can help it. Anyways, that's the readings for the day.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed the stream today, give us a like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, family, neighbors. If you want to help us out, you can donate to us directly through the chat. We have the 666 drive going on. Once we reach that, we'll get a Thetan meter. We'll tell you all about Scientology, and we will see the most clear is on the staff here.
It's definitely not going to be me.
Oh, yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Additionally, we have an Amazon wish list filled with books. As you can see, by the end of the year, we will be finished with the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And it would be very useful to get us one of those Septuagint Bibles or something, which is on that wish list to add to this table so that we have more to reference when we get into that. We have other books on there which can be added to this table, or which can serve as references for future videos.
I think a Greek New Testament would be cool to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a Vulgate too.
I don't know what I'd do with that, but yeah,
It
I
has
suppose.
more Apocrypha in it.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, it'll all be Greek to you.
Yeah. Besides which, the Catholic Church is the largest denomination
Right.
around, so it might be worth looking at what they do and how they do it differently. I know that they change in some Catholic Bibles the thing about making images, right? Whereas in the Holy Scriptures, they're like, don't make any image of anything in the sky above or under the earth or anything. No, the Catholics aren't like that, and they don't include it in their Bibles.
Right.
But we have stuff on that wish list. We also have a Patreon.
Yeah, we do, and Nightbot's actually doing okay today.
Yeah.
It's because we got more people talking. When more people talk, Nightbot does it more often.
Yeah. So our Patreon, if you donate $50 a month, you can be on the show once a month, in addition to a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, you could get books and shirts. You get shirts as well.
Yeah, Chris, why don't you pin one of our shirts?
Well, how about a newer one?
Which one?
How's that? What's the newest one?
Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, nothing new under the sun. Let's
Yeah.
pin that one. That's our newest shirt. Of course, if you stuck around or if you were here for
Ecclesiastes.
for Ecclesiastes, yeah, you would know that there's nothing new under the sun. So there it is. Let's see what else we got going on.
Facebook, Twitter.
Facebook, Twitter, free to follow us on those. Free, yeah, completely free of charge. Nothing there.
Yeah, and we'll be continuing Ezekiel, and I'm so glad that we are nearing the end of the Old Testament.
Me too. And I think we finished Wisdom of Solomon, right?
Yeah, we're going
Yes.
into Judith
Judith,
on Friday.
yes.
Hopefully that arrives.
It did. It did
Oh,
arrive.
good.
Yes.
We also have commentaries. On
Yes.
Judith.
And Judith, apparently, very crazy story.
Ooh.
Like closer along the lines of
Like Tobit?
yeah, closer to those lines, but a little bit more intense. There's a bit more murder. So
The UFO chapter.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was we had a good discussion about that, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the conclusion we came to was that the entire point of the chapter there was to kind of recreate a likeness of the ark.
Yeah, it was definitely something like that.
Yeah. Like the whole purpose was these things are presenting God and then bowing down to God, and yeah. And it's all in likeness. So it's not.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can also take the parallel of the wheels to the posts, which are used to hold up the ark.
Yeah.
Which we didn't mention there, but which is noteworthy.
Good to mention now.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's about it. We will see
you on Friday, also
and then
Sunday.
anytime.
We're around. That's what we do anytime.
See you later.